Please take your seat. I hope you enjoy the break and the coffee. There are some pupusas from El Salvador and some yummy food you can enjoy. We're going to continue with the next block. We're going to have a presentation about KIX and then a panel with our ministers joining. We're going to have a presentation that will address KIX objectives, the context, and the results and impact achieved in the process and the collaboration in the country's part of the KIX, with the baselines for the following conversations. We're going to ask Raúl Chacón, KIX Director from SUMMA, Esthefani Cerrato, General Subdirector of Educational Investigation from Honduras, and Germain Anthony, Technical Specialist Senior in Education of OECS. We're going to get started now, and then we're going to ask Esthefani and Germain to join the stage later after his presentation.
Good morning, everyone, colleagues from the OECS member state, from Guyana, Anglophone speaking countries.
So South America recently joined our efforts. Thank you all for being here, all of our partners from all the different organizations already mentioned several times. Many friendly faces. I would like to greet you all personally. It's a thrilling moment for all of us. It's an honor to be here presenting some of the progress that we've had with building up, putting our effort to what each one of you do in your countries. We thank your participation and the time to join us. And also highlight an additional word that it's a wonderful world that I like to highlight, and it's to recognize. Recognize, it's a word that works in English and French, but to recognize, it's written you can read it back and forth. As mentioned, the joy that we have to meet and what it means to improve the educational improvement and the focus in our children for the region. So I'm going to get starting thanking our host of Guatemala. I'll present. There's a lot of aspects that we've been working in the past years, more than 5 years, 2019, we started with the state of Caribbean and Oriental organization, and with our colleagues, it's important to recognize you and your teams. We're talking about hundreds, probably thousands of people behind who are here. We're 100 people met here, but there are thousands of people behind our teams, and of course, our main users and towards we point at. We'll give a little context on KIX. Many of you are new faces that haven't been here before, so we want to give a little context, a brief summary on what we're doing now since we met last time and how we're doing today. Since we met in 2023 in Honduras, now in Antigua 2025, and some final thoughts. KIX LAC Hub, it's a exchange and innovation exchange of knowledge, and it's complex, but I want to show in this slide the fundamental idea that we work in 3 great pillars, and those are mentioned already and they're explicit in everything we do. For one hand, the one that allows us to identify priorities and educational needs, known as the agenda setting in English. A second pillar, the mobilization of knowledge and exchange, that the heart of what we do, learning one another, exchange from the experience. And third, a very strong pillar that we've been developing with an impact, which is the regional and local capacity building. There's a series of initiatives that we're not going to get into detail. As we share in the following days, we will, especially with those that we've met before and weeks before. So throughout this time we have talked, but we're going to talk about reducing gaps of knowledge, studies, documents, mobilize knowledge in a database of knowledge that we have as public assets, effective practices, innovation maps, and of course a series of initiatives of workshops and learning experiences and technical visits. And as Javier mentioned, in the new direct support to countries connects with work agendas nowadays. This has faces, names, and last names rotating, but we talk about hundreds of people. Now it's updated. It's not for you to read the whole thing, but Guatemala's delegation joining today. But obviously, it's going to be modifying, and each professional joining the teams and are connected in the work we do at KIX. We have different educational ministries, centers, universities, and civil society from our countries. These were the faces from 2 years back. We're going to update this picture. We love to see the pictures and see the videos of what's going on. At the end of Guatemala's Honduras meeting, we identified some priorities and some strategies that will lead the following years that we are involved already. And we highlight the relevance of research, the evidence usage, the educational policy, also the dimension on early childhood education and care, considering the trajectory of the first days of children of our countries. Third, the teacher professional development has been something recurrent, and not only now for the continuous education, but the relevance identified in the countries with the teaching. And lastly, the challenges of inclusive education, gender equity and inclusion. Especially these days have been discussing in the previous months on the relevance on the foundational resources and learnings, knowing that they don't get over not only about reading and writing, math, but the abilities and socio-emotional learnings. We go beyond, and we would like to also take care of this, because the message is not to get the curriculum smaller, but to focus on the things that are the gateway for the holistic development of children. There are sports, philosophy, some others that come into the discussion of the holistic view and development, but those are the urgencies for our region. And lastly, financing has been something we've been talking about, and one of the learnings we had in what we understood, we talked about KIX 2.0 because we were looking at 2027, and we need to go deeper on the topics we're talking about. And that's why we're finding yearly views. In 2025, we're particularly discussing on the region, and it's important to highlight that because it's a bilateral work directly with countries and the specific needs of each country. But from the regional side, in 2025, we emphasize on the challenges of early childhood education and what it means from the structural and the regulation frameworks. Some countries work on financing, governance, and the curriculums. And of course, the assessment of learnings from the early childhood, which are particular, and we need to check on the educational trajectory. We're mobilizing a lot of knowledge that it's already existing by expert publication articles done nationally, regionally, and globally. It's important what we do. We always bring experiences that you are doing in your region and the ones our neighbors in other countries do, and what happens in the region and global organizations that are part of the discussion. Through seminars, webinars, workshops that allow to point out the development of some abilities. And we are also seeking to generate practice communities that maintain in time when we connect technical teams working in different subjects. We connect with teams from different countries that continue a discussion, and we maintain discussions and exchange open conversations and fruitful and productive. In early childhood, we are working this year, especially in this meeting. We will have some interesting and significant experiences on challenges from early childhood education in different levels. And we will have a series of initiatives we do, conversations of KIX to show what we do in the countries, bulletins, newsletters, conversations, workshops. Some numbers on what we're doing. It's very intense. There's a permanent engine that does not stop, and somehow we would like to keep alive and be open to conversations with you. And we are clear that we are continually contacting you to meet and to stay attentive to what we're discussing. About what we've doing. It's 2024, and the main outputs, it's that as the first thing, the discussion on production and knowledge mobilization and evidence, the globally SEWAD from OECD, and the gray literature, the production from the South, what we do in the South, workshops specifically to develop abilities on the analysis we do, the gray literature associated with management and others, production of articles that feed the policy. A central dimension is related with capacity strengthening, and for that we have a series of initiatives. I would highlight some that many of you in your countries and technical teams have participated in the exchange of learnings among countries, from El Salvador to Chile, Honduras, Chile, some countries from OECS to Guyana, Bahamas, concrete information that feeds the conversation, and as we discussed, to have concrete agendas that makes this not just an event, but the Guatemala event or the event for Guyana, but to continue with the different mechanisms that we've developed to advance. There's knowledge exchange, strengthening of relationships between countries, bilateral relationships in the North Triangle, Caribbean. So we broaden some other countries as well, and some much learning, and the capacity training is specifically in country support. My friends from Honduras and the Caribbean will give more information, but we're going to talk about the work that we do in El Salvador. And it started, Edgar is here from El Salvador, and we discussed in Honduras on how we were dreaming that this direct support mechanism can find an opportunity on what the country's focusing in. Same in other cases. Esthefani is going to talk about Honduras, where capacity building and educational research in the Ministry of Education with the curriculum strengthening and evaluation, and the work that we work in the Caribbean with the informational systems, learning between countries, development that diagnose that are being discussed, where we're thinking how to connect with the different spaces, and the work with the initial teaching and for the future teachers of our region. To close with some final thoughts, we identify the financing, the learning and regional learning dialogues between countries, and to balance in the need of deepen in relationships, bilateral and direct, to respond to concrete needs of the countries. So each country is different, and we need to find the mechanisms of deeper knowledge. To promote greater synergies, it's always present. We have the participation of an important number of projects and initiatives of innovation and research of the KIX ecosystem, and we want to deepen on what we do in the territories, and it's essential to promote these articulations and some greater mechanisms that support as GPE and some others that are acting from cooperation within the countries, as we talked about synergies. And the final thoughts, talking about the sustainability of the initiatives, can only be achieved if local actors lead the changes, and it's something we potentiate. And who is in charge of conducing the reformations, and that happens in national spaces with hopefully support of different actors and ecosystem of educational innovation. And ministries are leading evidently, but requires that leadership to be open to other actors' visions, that we know that the great objective is to find horizons in common, find consensus in those things that we're interested now that will be tomorrow as well. Thank you for being here, and let's take advantage of the journey. Thank you for your presentation. So we're gonna continue. Esthefani will come up. She's been already presented, so she's gonna come up and share. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the space. Greetings from our minister. For us, it's a great pleasure to have the space to share everything we've worked on for almost 2 years now with SUMMA. There are a lot of the initiatives that we get into the educational ministries, but it's complex to give response to everything and prioritize the urgency and the importance. It is important to highlight the work that we've done with SUMMA, because they've given the space to listen the needs that we've had from the Ministry of Education, from the vision our minister has. And everything started with a visit, the technical visit from Chile to Chile, with the conversations identifying priorities. As Secretariat of Education, he's been clear, the minister, on the vision on moving towards the evidence gathered. And from my role as research direction, we've had the openness and freedom to imagine design on the aspirations we have from Honduras to strengthen and work educational research. We've listened many times on the importance of evidence, but once you see it reflected in processes, from a initiative with this visit to listen to the experience of Chile, to have the counseling from Raúl, Rosa Maria, to have those spaces has been key to move towards the advances we've had. And when we started working with SUMMA, we were doing the profile for teachers in Honduras. And with these reflections, we were able to see the value we wanted to give the study, what was the importance and the guidance we were getting for these data. And from that, we've advanced with research policies has been very important. It is important to give relevance to how we've listened to the voice and prioritization from the Secretariat. This has been our way that it's been similar to some others. We've had great backup and spaces to reflect on what's practical, what can work, and to leave something a long run and not focusing only in actions that are for now, but we're working hand to hand in building the policy of educational research. We've had great feedback from the technical commission that were visited us in Honduras to have the conversations, the spaces, and to consolidate with the team research teams has been key. SUMMA has been supporting us in the development of this research diploma, and it has been a great experience because we've been able to centralize the processes. In a moment, everything we did in Honduras came from the center, and why we were investigating which departments we were moving on around the country. But now we're able to listen to the different states of the country and people who are living their reality. And it's been important because it's trying to keep a balance between the aspirations from policy plus listening to the voices of people in this context and a daily basis work within the states and the different states we have in reaching a big majority of teachers, and to articulate not only from the vision and studies that we may have from outside abroad, but the reality, the vision given from our teachers, and to listen to their voice within these documents. And we're thankful for this space. This is what we've been able to do with this class, this course. This has been very productive. We are trying to match this in a two-way. The capacity building for the central areas when it comes to authorities, and also decentralize it with the different states and the different teams of teachers. It's been challenging and very interesting, but we've seen sustainability, and it's a work in a space where we've got many people involved. They've taken the courage in participating, and we're moving forward with all this. It has been a very good professional experience, personally and professional. And there are many actions that we can develop in trying to keep that vision, to have actions to be long term. That for us is research policy, and to try to give actions to be immediate, who are capacity building for all the teachers participating in this course, and to have generate the spaces of reflection, analysis, and to give sense on, make sense on all the actions to at the end have a full development research policy. Not only aspirational, but to move it from the reality we have as educational secretariat. So that was very brief. This is what we've done. We're very thankful. The team has done a great job with SUMMA and the Educational Secretariat. We've done a really good job. They have been excellent. Many working hours, and it's gratifying to see things landing, seeing things advancing on what we have with the scores and technical visits. We invite you to promote and listen and to keep the vision of visualize actions for long term for educational systems. Thank you. Thank you. You can talk to her and deepen on the initiative that invites us to connect the central policy with territories to see perspectives of schools, teachers, as Esthefani said, and capacity building to be sustainable in time. We'll have time to talk with herders and learn from them. To close this block, I want to invite Germain Anthony, Senior Technical Specialist in Education of OECS, to share the experience they have with KIX.
Thank you. Good morning and greetings from the OECS. Buenos dias. Okay. Thank you. So I have the pleasure today of just highlighting some of the progress we've made on our regional AMIS initiative. As some of you would be well aware, it has been quite a struggle with such innovation systems within the region, the broader Latin American Caribbean region. So we'll get straight to it because there's a lot to unpack. So in terms of numbers, we can say we've achieved over the past 2 years, and I'm saying past 2 years because the pivotal point was Honduras, Intego, when we had that initial spark to begin this collaboration between KIX, SUMMA, and OECS. And so a lot has been achieved, and this is what I'm really going to be highlighting here. So we've had, in fact, all 9 member states involved in the initiative, but at the end, we've had 8 member states who have made significant progress. We've had 3 knowledge visits. Also, just 2 weeks ago, we completed a workshop focusing on the AMIS diagnostic assessment activity. And we have, since I believe it's almost a year now, we've established a regional AMIS task force and steering committee. So the big change, as far as we see it, is that each country for 20 years, 25 years have been working alone, going at it, all pursuing a software-oriented answer to AMIS. And so now what we have is more or less a more strategic, more coherent, and higher consensus-led approach in terms of developing AMIS in the region. So I just want to speak to a few milestones. So we would have had, at the 3rd annual meeting, as I mentioned, that collaboration, that chance meeting. I think it was Raúl, myself, Nicola Johnson, who used to be in Guyana, now with CDB. And we felt right then this was a perfect opportunity to see, because Guyana was just about 2.5 years into implementation. And we were very keen to understand what was happening with them, their successes, their challenges, and what have you. Another important milestone, of course, is the visit itself. And why it is so important, I'll tell you, has a lot to do with the mindset we had. And again, as I mentioned, we were talking about AMIS, looking at it through the technology lens. When in Guyana, we got a complete, I would say, awakening. It's not that we should be looking at education data management through a technology lens. We really need to be looking at it from an education planning lens. And I think that is one of the key things or takeaways from the Guyana experience. And so we understood, of course, if you're talking about systems to monitor your education performance, of course it has to be rooted in your education sector development plan. It has to be rooted in what your policies are for education enhancement. And so we would have had several delegates who visit from 5 Eastern Caribbean member states. And we, of course, as I mentioned, our focus was to find out what the best practices were. And I think it was quite an eye-opener for all the statisticians, the planners who were among the delegation. That visit was quickly followed with another visit to the Bahamas. The Bahamas, by the way, are probably another 3 years ahead in their implementation than Guyana. And so Guyana actually accompanied OECS on that mission. Our focus there was really on understanding what the Bahamas were doing in terms of building new models, increasing functionality to the IMIS, and understanding what, again, the technical issues they were having with that. And they were very gracious, just as the Guyana team, the Bahama team, I must say, Germain was a very gracious host. And you might have thought that with 5 years under the belt, that they had everything figured out. And of course not. Still struggling with convincing the Minister of Finance with putting in the additional resources for this system to work, even if there were 5 years of experience that this is working, it's producing results. There were issues as well with, obviously the staffing, the capacity at the ministry to sustain those systems. And so what it told us at the end of the day is we're much, much smaller than the Bahamas or Guyana. And if you really scope this IMIS endeavor undertaking, it requires a lot of trained and skilled people in the right place, and these people have to be paid, right? And so we then became even more convinced that our regional approach would be the best approach. Because if we single out any one of the member states in the OECS, we don't have the resources of a Guyana or the Bahamas, for example, and they were showing signs that they had every day a big job, a big task of convincing their leaders of that. Of course, very important, as I mentioned 2 weeks ago, we would have concluded a regional workshop that has brought, I would say, culminated the IMIS diagnostic activity, which would have started in January. We had another chance meeting at the Transforming Education Symposium held in the Cayman just the year before. And that occasion facilitated the bringing together of minds. Again, Raúl, I think Mohammed was there. We had Javier, we had Nicola, IDB colleagues. And as the conversation continued, we agreed that we really need to do a comprehensive kind of assessment of IMIS readiness in the islands. One that would, first of all, be very much in depth, but to give the countries, at the end of the day, a very landscape sort of report on where their strengths or where their weaknesses or what they needed to address even before trying to implement IMIS. But of course, several of the member states are already implementing IMIS. And the fact is, irrespective of what stage you're at in the implementation phase, it is important to do that assessment. You need to understand where your maturity lies and where your weaknesses are, and to be able to address those. So we're very grateful for that. And at the end of the day, what we have are individual country, very much in-depth 40, 50-page reports looking at the domains, finance, governance, infrastructure, all of that. So the countries, excuse me, I think now have a clearer understanding of what the context is for their IMIS implementation. I think we can also boast of now having now at least a more complete mapping of IMIS reality in the OECS. Because if you ask member states prior, they would tell you, well, we have a software here, or we've been using this, we've been using spreadsheets, but it was never very clear what was the infrastructure or the underlying foundation or the support for these systems. Okay, so moving as quickly as I can, the regional task force, that was, of course, mandated by our Council of Ministers. Well, really the caucus meeting that was held in January of 2024. And that is very key because that is going to represent the governance body to first of all, represent the ministries of the individual ministries of education, but also to really be the key, the linchpin for the collaboration in the region. That's going to be important. I keep turning around, it's instinct. So we have that in place. It's very much functional. We've met, I think, by now 5 or 6 times, if my count is correct. And we've also now merged with the broader Caribbean, regional Caribbean IMIS Forum, which of course is an initiative being led by IDB. So what you see, technical workshops of IDB, it's really a bit of wishful thinking, I would say. But what we're saying is that we're collaborating on having those technical exchanges online with IDB through these conversations. It would be remiss of me not to mention Neil Butcher. Of course, he's a consultant many of us who work on IMIS in the region we will be aware of, and he exists at many of these layers, and that has proven to us to be a bit helpful because it's easier to communicate what we're trying to do and where we're trying to go. Final one here, the IMIS, as I mentioned, I feel like I'm repeating myself, I'll just have to say it again. This IMIS workshop that was completed. So the countries have their IMIS diagnostic reports. They do have to do a final review of it themselves to validate all information. So that is not quite yet done. But there are 4 or 5 things we're trying to focus on as the next steps. And I hope our development partners are paying close attention because we are going to need, of course, continued support where that is, these are concerned. And so, of course, we have to give that feedback to the consultant based on the reports that they received. So the countries are going to develop the individual national business requirement strategies on their own because, of course, there are different phases of implementation. And they're also going to, we now are together as a region are looking to develop an open data standard, which is a very, very important development for us because we need, as different players are in the game, different ministries, stakeholders, we need for every implementation of IMIS to have that consistency in terms of the quality of data collected, the types of indicators that are being tracked, how the reporting is done, because we as at the OECS Commission, we track very closely these OECS indicators, which are the regional, education performance indicators. And of course, we've been working closely with UIS to bring in alignment many of our member states with UIS data standards, and of course, generally internationally, the SDG 4 goals. So finally, in the next steps, we're hoping to convince everyone that it makes better sense to develop as we go along, not to disrupt or put aside existing processes, but as we go along with IMIS development, for example, in Grenada and in St. Lucia, to come up with an IMIS, a harmonized IMIS policy template, so that you have countries like Antigua and Barbuda who are now seeking to develop a policy. They need not start from zero. They basically should be able to benefit from what's already developed in your St. Vincent Grenadines and St. Lucia. And that, I can tell, is a conversation we've had, but I won't mention names. So, someone saying, okay, so it's a good conversation, okay? So, just very quickly, we can say we now have better coordination between ministerial departments. Just that saying, just alone on the experience we've had with our task force, we have better prepared technical teams, many of whom participated in our workshop. We have, I think, a stronger internal, not just consensus, but understanding of IMIS, and that's important. We're focus on building capacity as an OECS commission, but with the support from KIX, I think we're seeing more, in more realistic terms, greater self-success. That's an expression more important these days. So we're learning from each other. We're seeing, or I should say we're a bit hopeful that we will soon be able to develop proven and replicable models. And of course, we are documenting these shared lessons as we go along. As I mentioned, St. Lucia, Grenada are doing a lot of work already on their policies. In the region of those, of the 9 or now 10, only one, which I think is BVI, would already had a MIS policy. So the balance, of course, are in development. And hence, where we see the importance of synergy for policy harmonization. Of course, the regional vision is, of course, to move from the idea of every country for themselves and for us to work together to be stronger together. As I mentioned, the task force is operational. It has the backing and the endorsement of the major policy heads and the ministers themselves. And the regional image strategy is actually under development as we speak. I may not look very excited or, enthusiastic as the Minister of Education, but I guess the volcano here is much larger than the one in St. Lucia. Ours is dormant, but still potent. I'm just trying to make a comparison here. But before 2023, again, as you could tell from what I've been saying so far, it's been more or less disparate and separate efforts. But let's focus now on where we are right now. There's a lot of collaborative learning going on. I can tell you a lot of the anecdotal experiences in terms of conversations with ministerial staff in the OECS. They'll tell you they're so happy they were able to be on that knowledge exchange, that they had that chance to have the conversation with Raúl, with Neil, with Mohammed. In fact, I think just some weeks ago, that same diagnostic assessment was something very helpful in helping with approvals for some of the projects, because the more you know, the better you can give guidance on those things. So we think we're in a position now to better optimize resources, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. And so for the next 12 months, this is the gauntlet we've set, is to have our regional image strategy finalized. There's an OECS SKIP project, which is a World Bank funded project, which has a focus on higher education. There's an IMIS component to it. We're hoping to leverage some of that work in terms of the technical capacity to build some of the functionality we want to be able to do for the regional IMIS. Of course, it won't do everything, but there's some key benefits we want to leverage. Of course, we want to expand the task force. Reason being, we think there's a role for more development partners to play. And important, more partnerships developed, hint, hint. We expect that more tools are going to be developed to support the interoperability of our IMIS systems. And of course, more technical exchanges to improve on that. I think okay, I can probably leave that as is on the screen. I don't think, oh, no, I need to read this, sorry. Sorry to belabor you. So how we see this panning out is each individual member state, of course, having their individual instance of the IMIS system or systems. And bear in mind, a system is not necessarily one piece of software. It may be made up of several components. But there's a regional coordination led by the task force, the regional task force. We also see the harmonized policy I spoke about earlier and the open data standards as very key pillars that all countries should adopt by 2026. Interoperability, as I mentioned, that's going to be very important among your national data systems. We don't expect we can do it all in 2 years, but for instance, you may have your health management systems, civil registry systems that may be able to talk to these systems. Or, in fact, the first one we should talk about is our LMS systems. And consolidating capabilities is very critical to us, of course, because of our small size. So we're talking about consolidating cloud network infrastructure where it's possible, and also consolidating in terms of the technical support, which we want in part to be homegrown, because we have to rely on ourselves, at least to an extent. Of course, we expect that there's going to be, by 2026, enhanced reporting on these indicators. That's very important. And we want to be able to, at some point, export the same model outside the region, because we want to grow beyond and to, of course, give. I want to wrap this up by saying quick thanks to our strategic partners. I've listed, I hope, everyone in there. And I also want to mention, special mention to our local, ministries, governments, who sometimes have to bear with us for the volumes of correspondence we send their way. So I'll wrap up with saying, of course, what began as a knowledge exchange with KIX SUMMA has become a regional transformation, which we believe will strengthen education and data management throughout the Eastern Caribbean. We strongly believe in that, and we look forward to your, further commitments and stronger bonding. I cannot find enough words. But thank you, Javier. Thank you, Raúl, and the rest of the team.